Saying, well, we've got more news to bring you. In an interview with Sky News, McDonald's Vice Chairman and CEO Jim Skinner railing against spending and high taxes. Skinner saying we need to look at corporate taxes to make the U.S. more competitive. Listen to this.
You have to cut taxes in some environments, particularly in the business community. We pay some of the highest taxes around the world relative to business corporate tax. And there needs to be some leveling in the playing field there.
Thoughts on this? We turn to a man who knows a thing or two about taxes. David Stockman is the former budget director under President Reagan. He's live with us in studio.
Good to see you, David.
Good morning. Thank you for coming in. Well, there's a lot of things we could talk about, but let's start with the corporate taxes that Jim Skinner referred to. What are your thoughts on where we need to go in regard to that?
I don't really agree with him. We are broke. The United States is broke. We cannot afford tax cuts for anyone, not corporations, not the rich, not the middle class, even the poor. And so to be whining about the corporate tax, I think, is the wrong thing. It is not that big a burden. Yes, there's a 35% nominal rate, but the numbers clearly show we collect 17% of corporate profits, domestic corporate profits in taxes. That's at or below most of our competitors.
Why not get rid of some of those
tax, well, you know,
right?
Well,
I mean, why not make it simple?
Well, look, I think the corporate income tax is a monument to crony capitalism. It is, you know, Swiss cheese squared in terms of all the loopholes, all of the archaic definitional matter which make it a junky tax. And if there is some way to broaden the base, I would agree with that. But that isn't the urgent priority in this country today. There are two more urgent. One is beginning to fix our deficit, or we're going to be exactly where Greece and Italy and next France and the rest of Europe is. And secondly, we need to deal with the real tax burden in this country, which is the payroll tax. We have the highest cost labor in the world, and we put $1 trillion worth of payroll taxes on employers and employees. I believe what we have to do is start taxing consumption with a VAT or some tax of that sort, and relieve dramatically, if not entirely, the payroll tax. Well, that's what's hurting McDonald's, actually, right, even more than the corporate tax.
But, David, let's get back to our insolvency, as you've referred to it. And I've said this for years. Nothing in this country and nothing in Washington will change until our borrowing costs as a nation go through the roof. Is there any sign that that's going to happen? Because we look great compared to the whole of Europe at this point, and it looks like people are still willing to lend us money at ridiculously low rates.
Yes, and I think you've put your finger right on the problem and why I'm so pessimistic about Washington ever, in the near term anyway, addressing this problem. And I blame the Fed. The Fed has totally manipulated the capital markets, the bond market. It has suppressed interest rates down to zero in the short end and manipulated the whole curve, you know, this Operation Twist. And as a result, the bond market has been destroyed. It's not an honest bond market giving signals about real economic risk and real economic prospect. But the signal it does give is to Washington that debt is free. You can borrow 2-year money at 30 basis points. So why is someone who is a congressman or senator going to fall on the sword, take the massive heat of cutting off spending or raising some revenue, if basically Bernanke and the Fed are saying, hey, borrow all you want, debt is free, the carry cost of this $15 trillion debt is not a fraction of what it should be if we had honest interest rates.
Interest rates are zero. And, you know, final thing, what about the Republican Party? We have Democrats on the show all the time. We challenge them on a whole host of issues. But also Republicans come on, and almost none of them, unless they're not in office anymore, someone like Alan Simpson, will tell you that taxes, any kind of taxes, should be considered to go higher. Grover Norquist basically controls all that. They say,
yes,
no way, we're not
I agree, and that is why we're in such a bad bind and paralysis. The job of the Republican Party is partly to make sure we have rational, efficient, non-disruptive taxes, not simply to stand there and say no taxes, no taxes, no taxes. And when you're taking in 15% of GDP and spending 24%, I agree. cut the 24%.
You could do it with tax. You could do it with tax reform if you got rid of the loopholes and raised revenue.
But you can raise revenue, but you're going to have to do it not out of loopholes. You're going to have to do it out of a new consumption tax. We way overconsume in this country. We live beyond our means. We borrow money from China, and we need to tax consumption. And until the Republicans realize that and stand up for it, we're just going to have a food fight. The problem with closing loopholes is that, crony capitalism.
Come back.
No, they come back. We did that in 1986. We're back where we were. $200 billion of the loophole in the income tax, for instance, is capital gains and dividend exclusion, taxing them lightly. Do you think anybody's going to close that loophole? Or health insurance? Or home ownership? That's the problem.
I hope you come back on again soon. Unfortunately, we could go all day on this stuff. But thank you very much for coming in today.
Nerds.
David Stockman.
No, and it's important, David.